what kind of family are allied with the top 13 Illuminati bloodlines. The Illuminati seeks to capture the occult power of powerful occult bloodlines around the world. They have intermarried with American Indians to gain the spiritual power resident within the leading spiritual American Indians. Various Indian reservations are used for Illuminati rituals. They have been doing this type of thing for thousands of years. Powerful families around the world participate on different levels with the Illuminati. Some participate on a business level, such as the various crime mafia-type families around the world. Mafia families might not subscribe to the occult philosophy, but they do recognize power and business. Some powerful families around the world participate simply on the level that they have been sucked into the world's system and are dependent upon going along with the flow of the world's system. An example of this would be the King of Nepal. The King of Nepal rules over a poor Hindu kingdom. The British Empire has done a great job in trying to make Nepal dependent upon them. Nepal was given British protection. Their leading families were given British educations, and their leading tribe of warriors, the Gorkhas, have been serving as British mercenaries. Should the King of Nepal break loose from his advisors and take an anti-NWO track, his throne could be taken away via revolution or invasion. The NWO has the capacity to arrange for the Indian Congress Party to invade or some other destabilizing factor. The British MI6 and the American CIA have also stationed assets agents in the country. However, the trump card in sucking nations like Nepal in is to create conflict like the Cold War and then apply Hegelian dialectics. Many nations around the world have been forced to cozy up with the British and Americans because of the Cold War. Secretly manufactured and secretly controlled international conflicts are a great way to take away the independence of some of the smaller nations. The King of Nepal has for many years feared invasions from either India or China. However, Switzerland has been afforded the luxury of not having to take sides in the Illuminati's secretly created wars, because the bloodlines have had such total control over Switzerland for so many centuries. There is no need for Switzerland to participate in Hegelian dialectics. If families are powerful but not in the Illuminati's clique, they can be destroyed, such as Howard Hughes was. An example of this is how the Rothschilds progressively destroyed the Romanovs, the Russian imperial family. But the Romanovs were also an occult bloodline, and so the Illuminati secretly took children of the imperial family to serve as breeders for the Illuminati so that the Illuminati could channel in the Romanovs' occult blood into their bloodlines. The families that controlled Switzerland go back to Venice. Some of the Panariot families of the Byzantines have had enduring powerful lineages. The Venetian and Genoese banker/international commerce families have produced some enduring powerful lineages. Families from these groups have tended toward Satanism, Gnosticism, or cults that are not Christian. In this category, we can mention Darius Sicinius of Venice. Note also that the Warburgs, who work so closely with the Rothschilds, are descendants of Abraham del Banco, an old banker in Venice. The Warburgs in turn are related to the Rosenbergs of Kiev, Russia. Some of your old aristocratic Russian occult bloodlines were the first to financially help Hitler's fledgling Nazi party. The powerful bloodlines diversify into different last names, but some of them still have enough visibility that they can be halfway tracked by their modern names. For instance, the Cabot family of Boston are descendants of Sebastian Cabot, who was born in Venice. Sebastian Cabot, whose father was John Cabot, was in turn descended from Giovanni Caboto of Genoa. Giovanni Caboto was a member of a powerful family in Genoa. In modern times, the Cabot family has been active in politics and intelligence agencies for the NWO. For instance, Thomas D. Cabot set up Radio Swan on Swan Island for the CIA. Paul Cabot was a director of J.P. Morgan and Company, beside director of other corporations that interlock with the Illuminati's power. Your ruling families in Western Europe tie back to William of Orange. There is a powerful Arabic connection to the Illuminati. Men like Sir Archibald Darley Shah are very knowledgeable about Arab magic and occult practices. Sir Archibald Darley Shah has written at least 70 books on magic and occultism. These families keep track of their genealogies, and certain members of these occult families know the histories of these families. I believe that a history of the top 13 Illuminati families is the key to understanding history. Many of the families which appear to be allied with the top families are actually related at some point back in time. Further, many of the allied families are top-level flunkies for the families with the real power. Some people have tried to put the Rothschilds in this category, but such thinking is nonsense. Not only do I have too many eyewitnesses who have come from the inside of the Illuminati who say the Rothschilds are one of the top, but one can also point to how much control and wealth the Rothschilds exercise. The process of history has been to increase their control and wealth. The overall picture can't be denied. The Rothschilds are not flunkies for some other more powerful family. I believe that an investigator will do himself a favor in tracking down the ties a family has with the top bloodlines and how that family interacts with the top families. This is the principle behind why history books discuss royalty so much. All that I encourage is that people investigate Satan's royalty in order to understand how Satan's realm, the power behind the scenes, operates. In the Be Wise as Serpents book I gave a good example of how Satan's realm works behind the scenes. The Illuminati control the Watchtower Society. The nominal head of the WD Society for many years was their president Fred France. Yet, Fred France had grown very old, was blind and stayed in his bed. Nather Salich was supposedly Fred France's bodyguard and helper, but all communications to WD President Fred France had to go through 6'2" Nather Salich, who would supposedly ask France and then would come back with an answer. Apparently Salich may be from an Iraqi Jewish bloodline. He wears big rings and has expensive tastes. Salich was the channel through whom the Illuminati could pass their decisions for the WD onto the governing body and Bethel staff. The Bundy bloodline. My knowledge and research is limited. So much more work can be done to uncover the evil works of darkness that collaborate to destroy the Christian faith. Hopefully articles like this will serve as spotlights on the Jekyll and Hyde that ravage our land, and that seeing their opponents better, Christians will avoid the many secret spiritual undertows that drown so many. In the 1980s, one of the most famous criminals was a serial killer named Ted Theodore R. Bundy. It is not publicly known why he killed so many innocent victims. Ted Bundy told his girlfriend Elizabeth Kendall that the force caused him to kill. Bundy's confession to her was given after his final arrest in Florida. Elizabeth wrote down his confession as he gave it to her over the phone. Ted said, "I don't have a split personality. I don't have blackouts. I remember everything I've done. Like Lake Sammamish. We went out to Farrell's for ice cream after eating hamburgers. It wasn't like I had forgotten or couldn't remember, but it was just over ... gone ... The force wasn't pushing me anymore. I don't understand it. The force would just consume me." Kendall, Elizabeth. The Phantom Prince. My Life with Ted Bundy. Seattle, Madrona Publishers, 1981. p. 176. The force is the very term that high-level Satanists use to describe the power that they believe in, which they believe can be used for either good or evil. The movie Star Wars surprisingly used the Illuminati's term the Force, which up until that time had been reserved for esoteric use by Satanism and the occult. This is part of a plan to take the occult and its goals and instill it into the public's thinking and goals, so that the conspiracy becomes an open conspiracy with the general public, promoting the drive toward witchcraft as the world religion and its one world government. Who was Ted, and why did he do what he did? There are a great number of unknowns about Ted. And although it appears to the public that the newspapers covered his crimes thoroughly, often appearances can be very deceiving. If Ted Bundy was related to the Bundy family of the hierarchy, we could expect several things almost without doubt. 1. That his satanic activities and any occult connotations to the murders would be kept very secret by the police, the newspapers, and his family. 2. That information about the case and Ted Bundy would be closely contained. Interestingly, when I recently went to research Ted Bundy, every copy, all 4 of them, of the book Ted Bundy, Conversations with a Killer by Stephen G. Mishout had been stolen from the Portland Central Library. One of the other books on him was also missing, and the other was overdue. The university library, which is on a different library network, was just as bad. I did my research across the border in Washington state. Another category of books that is consistently stolen, I have been told by the library staff, are books on Freemasonry. Consequently, the Portland Central Library has a policy that interlibrary loan books on Freemasonry cannot be taken out of the library, even though the lending library doesn't mind if they are checked out. Another example of how books relating to Satanism or the Satanic Conspiracy become rare is when I checked the Thurston Company WA Library's computerized system for an unleashed Satanic Bible. Of the system's 18 copies, 14 were lost. I assume stolen. 1 was listed trace and 3 were being held by the libraries, that is, they were not out on the shelves. Before proceeding any further, let me categorically state that I haven't found anything that ties Ted Bundy in with the top satanic family of the Bundys, nor have I found anything that disproves it either. I don't know either way. Still, there are some interesting items about Theodore Bundy. Perhaps someone else will be motivated to do the genealogy work, and save me the work. Ted was a law student. One of the schools he studied law at was University of Puget Sound, WA. A major reason he did so poorly in law school was the immense stress that took place in his life in connection to the time and effort he put into murdering beautiful women. Yet, his poor academic performances were no barrier to his political success. Ted does have a number of items that seem suspicious. First, Ted drove all the way from Washington state to Miami, FL, to take part in Nelson Rockefeller's 1968 campaign. He was a big Rockefeller fan. Ted was appointed assistant chairman of the Washington State Republican Central Committee. Ted traveled in elite social circles, and was preparing for a campaign for Ted to run for state governor. For instance, in 1973, he was part of the Republican State Committee. He may have been on this committee in other years too. Ironically, Ted Bundy had served briefly on the Seattle Crime Commission on a study of white-collar crime. For whatever reasons, whether it be elite connections or his willing personality, it is certain that he had a big political career in front of him as a young person if he had not blown things. Second, almost all the serial killers have had connections to Satanism, and in every case the media and the police have suppressed or greatly downplayed their connections to Freemasonry and Satanism. For instance, Charles Manson, Freemason, OTO and Satanism; Sam of Sam Berkowitz, OTO and Satanism; Jack the Ripper, Freemason; and Henry Lee Lucas, Satanism. Could it be that Ted Bundy had a satanic side to him? I haven't seen anything that shows that he wasn't a Satanist. He did join the Mormon Church during the middle of time period of years when he was murdering innocent women, but his motive for joining certainly had nothing to do with sincerely serving God. I have learned that Ted had an interest in astrology. Perhaps the closest person to Ted Bundy, his longtime girlfriend Elizabeth Kendall, wrote in her book The Phantom Prince My Life with Ted Bundy that she didn't know why he brutally killed so many women. She was aware that he liked bondage-type sexual arrangements, but the inner workings of Ted's mind were a mystery to her. And Ted was capable of some of the biggest lying and yet coming across totally honest. This type of lying goes on every day by the Illuminati members who as a habit make bold-faced lies to the public. Ted Bundy was adopted by his father Johnny Bundy, who was a dentist in the northwest area of Washington state. What is this main branch of Bundys that we are speculating that Ted's father might or might not be tied to? The original Bundy family came to the New World before 1635 to Boston, Ms. A few years later they moved to Taunton, Ms. A large branch of these Bundys went to Connecticut, and later a few went on to New York. Another group of colonial American Bundys were in North Carolina. The particular members of the Bundy family that are prominent in the New World Order today are the ones who would have inherited the position of authority over the family if satanic tradition had been followed. The Bundy family was an old American family that was part of the Eastern establishment, but with only a few exceptions like Congressman Solomon Bundy in the early 19th century. The family has only come into the public's eye during the 20th century. This family also surfaces in not-so-prominent places too. Two of the key early Watchtower Society leaders were Bundys. These were Walter H. Bundy, who went with Charles Taze Russell to Great Britain on his May 29–31, 1909 trip, and Edwin Bundy, who worked at the Bethel headquarters at the turn of the century and traveled around the United States for the Watchtower Society from 1906 to 1910. The following is my own who's who of the Bundy Illuminati family. After this list introducing our cast of characters, this article will get back to discussing the Bundys. Who's who of the Bundys? Eric Bundy, placed in charge of the prisoner Howard Hughes by the Illuminati family of Onassis. More about this later. Eugene H. Bundy, lawyer, judge 1889-1896 v. Press. and Directory. Central Trust and Savings Company, banking ties, Directory. Industrial Company, partner Bundy and Jones, chairman executive. Com. of the Republican State Central Committee in 1898 and 1900, Knights of Pythias, Order of Red Men, Order of Elks, Episcop. Frederick George Bundy, Skull and Bones in it. 1921 CHRMN. North Atlantic Philip Council area. Lowell Bundy married Skull and Bones member Gasper D. and Alot Helen Bennett. 1939 with Harriet's brother Harvey Hollister Bundy 1888–1963 Skull and Bones in it. 1909 Special Acts. 2 Seconds of War. Stimson Skull and Bones law clerk for Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, key Pentagon man on the Manhattan Project. Seconds of the United States Sugar Equalization Board, CHRM. Ken Panama Railway Coat, in the U.S.S. Final Zone. CHRMN. Boston Personal Property Trust, Directory. Boston 5 Cents Savings Bank, Directory. State Street and Union Trust Companies, Directory. New England Merchants, Directory. R.M. Brady Coat. In 1952, he became the chairman of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, CHRM, then Foreign Bondholders Protective Council, trustee and president of World Peace Foundation, Chair Wellesley College, Chairman of the New England Rhodes Scholarships Selection Committee, Member Century Association, and some other things. Unitarian. Harry W. Bundy Mason, Satanist, and Chief Addict. 9 Degrees of SRICF. Harvey Hollister Bundy, Jr. Possibly in it. In one of the other Yale secret societies, banker Catherine Lawrence Bundy, daughter of Harvey Hollister, Sr. McGeorge Bundy, 1919, MJ12, Skull and Bones in it. 1940 CFR, President Ford Foundation, Bill Durberger, Special Assistant to Presidents Kennedy and Johnson on National Security Affairs, National Security Advisor. Robert Bundy edited Images of the Future, the 21st Century and Beyond. William Putnam Bundy, 1917, Skull and Bones in it. 1939 C.F.R. CIA 1951-61. Once CIA, always CIA. Editor of CFR's Foreign Affairs. 1972. Member of the Permanent Steering Committee of the Bilderbergers. Gas. Seconds of State. Far Eastern Affairs. 64-69. 1960 Staff Directory of Presidential Commission on National Goals. Professor MIT. 1969-71. Part of the law firm of Covington and Burling, which represents many of the Illuminati elite in Washington, D.C. Other prominent Bundys include Charles Allen Bundy, Foundation Executive, Manager of several companies, President Springs Foundation, and President Close Found, China, SC Parks, Recreation and Tourism Dominant. Mem. SC Coordinating Council for Econ. Devil, Rotary Club President, CHRMNBD.LST Meth. Church 1978-79 Charles H. Bundy SCC. Of Frost Foundation Charles W. Bundy SCC. Of Cornelius Foundation Edwin S. Bundy Business Executive, Cornell University. Century Association Hezekiah Sanford Bundy Congressman, lawyer, Jonas Mills Bundy founder and education-in-chief of New York Evening Mail newspaper, close friend of President Garfield, law degree Harvard. Omer Bundy West Pointer, General William Edgar Bundy S. Atreso District, Trustee Ohio University, editor of some journals. What is so powerful about the Bundys? Most Americans would not recognize the Bundy family as a powerful elite family. However, during recent history, two Bundy brothers held the key positions that controlled most of the information that was fed to the United States presidents during the Kennedy and Johnson administrations. When Johnson took over after J.F. Kennedy was assassinated, McGeorge Bundy was in the key position as Nat. Second's advisor to determine what the president did and didn't hear. His brother was in a key State Department position. Both Bundy brothers were also fraternal brothers of the Illuminati Order of the Skull and Bones. Interestingly, Jonas Mills Bundy (1835–1891) was a key advisor to President Grant, President Garfield, and President Chester A. Arthur. McGeorge Bundy and his brother William P. Bundy have held important CFR and important Bilderberger positions. This in itself makes it clear that the position and power of these two men is extensive. McGeorge Bundy sat on MJ12, which is the Council of Wise Men that rules the United States. C.B. Wise as Serpents CHPTR 2.13 for an explanation about what MJ12 is and documentation. The United States has been the most powerful nation overall on the earth. So without a doubt McGeorge has had both great public known and great secret power. The three most prominent Bundys to write about are Harvey Hollister Bundy, Sr., William P. Bundy, and McGeorge Bundy. We will now take a look at these three along with Eric Bundy, who was given a key position in a sinister plot to steal all wealth and power of Howard Hughes. and Harry W. Bundy, who was a chief adept of one branch of the Illuminati, Harvey Hollister Bundy Sr. His grandfather was a lawyer and congressman, and his father was a lawyer. Harvey also became a lawyer, but he didn't stop there. Harvey was initiated in the Skull and Bones in 1909. After his law degree he did some world traveling. Then in 1914, he began working for Justice Wendell Holmes. Later in 1929, Alger Hiss CFR also began working for Justice Holmes. Hiss was a communist spy and later a key player during F.D. Roosevelt's reign. Harvey's son William P. narrowly missed having his career ruined because William had financially helped Alger Hiss. Harvey had 5 children. 3 of these had ties to the Skull and Bones Order also. Harvey became the Ass Secretary of State 1 and July 1931 until March 1933 under Henry Louis Stimson. Secretary of State H. L. Stimson was also a Skull and Bones member in it. 1888 Harvey's son McGeorge Wood co-authored a book with Stimson entitled On Active Service in Peace and War in 1940. Harvey was Special Legal Assistant to the United States Secretary of the Treasury. Harvey became the Special Assistant to the Secretary of War during WWII. He traveled with the Seconds of War overseas numerous times. It is often said when if you want to know where the real power lies, look at a man's advisors. Here we see Harvey giving advice to the United States Secretary of Bones, pages 49 to 50, where we give various reasons why Covington and Burling are highly suspected of left-wing activity. William began his war during the United States' largest military challenge in history. Harvey was one of the most key figures in the supervision of the Manhattan Project developing the atom bomb. He was the key Pentagon man. He did liaison work between the War Department and Office of Scientific Research and Development. In 1952, Harvey took over the Carnegie Endowment for Peace from John Foster Dulles. The Carnegie Endowment for Peace has been a major vehicle for the Illuminati to finance tax-free various projects. In 1971, for instance, the Carnegie Endowment for Peace spent over $2 million and had assets of $41 million. The stated object of the foundation is to promote international peace. This is the type of peace that President George Bush told the United Nations that the world needed. Skull and Bones member George Bush informed the UN that a one-world government peace was needed by the world. Harvey got the job at Carnegie because Alger Hiss had been convicted of perjury. John Foster Dulles was on record recommending Alger Hiss to replace himself. See Eleanor Gallant and John Foster Dulles and Their Family Network by Leonard Mosley, page 311. The various men who run the various Carnegie Foundations worked with the Rockefellers. William P. Bundy started out his career in 1947 working for Covington and Burling, which is a firm that represents many of the Illuminati in Washington, D.C. Covington and Burling appears to have been a conduit for the Illuminati to create a left-wing political movement in the United States. Read Anthony Sutton's book America's Secret Establishment, An Introduction to the Order of Skull. Career working for the CIA at this time 1947, and in 1951 he quit Covington and Burling to begin openly working for the CIA as an analyst, and then as assistant to the deputy director of the CIA. His job as assistant required him to get atomic energy clearance. In 1953, Joe McCarthy had caught on to the New World Order. Although the history books and papers report that he was commie hunting, if one reads Joe McCarthy's own words, it is clear he was gunning for the New World Order. Senator Joe McCarthy subpoenaed William Bundy to testify. The senator knew he could expose a great deal if William P. Bundy was questioned, and if he might try to lie. The calling card to get the subpoena was the fact that William had donated at least $500 to help communist spy defend himself. His brother Donald worked for Covington and Burling when William was there, and Alger had worked at the firm William's dad had worked at. McCarthy sent down many subpoenas, but Allen Dulles, who was part of the Illuminati and the CIA director, ignored the subpoenas, and eventually was able to get William P. out of the country so that he would not have to face McCarthy's questions. The State Department was going to arrest William P. at the dock as he was trying to escape on the Queen Mary, but Allen Dulles was able to get the State Department to call off the arrest, and William P. Bundy sailed. McCarthy wrote Allen Dulles, "I know your refusal to give us any answers to our questions. Your insistence is very revealing. It would seem that the last man in the world who would try to protect and hide the facts about one of his top officers' Bundy association with, and contributions to, the convicted traitor would be the head of the CIA. I think it necessary for me to call your attention to the tremendous damage you thereby do to this organization. That the matter cannot and will not rest here is, of course, obvious." The biography of Eleanor Gallant and John Foster Dulles and Their Family Network by Leonard Mosley, p. 322. Lou Russell, who was an important figure in the House Un-American Activities Committee (HUAC), was part of the Illuminati power structure. This is something one wouldn't expect. It appears like some of the men McCarthy thought were on his side weren't. While the His/Bundy affair led to McCarthy, a genuine patriot, being killed and discredited, someone else who was a socialist and lackey of the CFR was given wide publicity as an anti-communist hero from what happened to his. Funny how the credit is distributed by the establishment media. This socialist was Richard Nixon, CFR. He was given false credit for convicting his CFR to build a false public image as an anti-communist crusader. Nixon did not do the footwork, etc., to get his convicted, contrary to the false image the establishment newspapers and history books give. Later, protected by his anti-communist mask, Nixon would recognize Red China, among many other pro-communist NWO acts. By trying to subject a member of one of the top 13 Illuminati families to congressional questioning, McCarthy had signed his death warrant. It was not long before the Illuminati killed McCarthy, and they have dragged this great patriot's name through the mud. Skull and bones. George Bush was still taking pot shots at Joe McCarthy during the 1992 presidential campaign. William P. Bundy commented on the help Allen Dulles gave him throughout the Hits affair with the following words, "I guess there was an element of tribal loyalty in the way Allen handled this, that he knew me, he knew my brother, the sort of fellow feeling, a feeling for the comradeship of the CIA, but also a tribal feeling toward a set of people who were in law firms, entered government when the need was felt, could be invited back to the House. Yes, that set of people is called the Illuminati." In 1960, William P. Bundy, while still with the CIA, was placed as the staff director of the MU Presidential Commission on National Goals. If national goals are seriously being set, then that implies that something is happening above and beyond the American people voting at the voting booths, congressmen voting at the Capitol, and the marketplace simply functioning. Indeed, there is a guiding hand behind events which is taking us down a pre-planned route to achieve Illuminati goals. Bundy's Commission on National Goals set down goals that are Hegelian philosophy. The goals state that the individual has a duty to advance the will of the state, and that the state is to stimulate changes of attitude. The American citizen in the years ahead ought to devote a larger portion of his time and energy directly to solution of the nation's problems. Many ways are open for citizens to participate in the attainment of national goals. America's secret establishment. P.50 Eric Bundy. The Illuminati uses what is called Hegelian philosophy. The thesis is set up. An antithesis, the opposite of the thesis, is then set up, and then out of the conflict of the two comes a synthesis. Hegelian philosophy is really a fancy term for what the Illuminati were doing before the term was invented. To bring this all down to street terms, the Illuminati's mafia, yes, the Illuminati created and runs the mafia, would send businessmen a letter demanding money and signed with the imprint of a black hand. This was the thesis. If the demand wasn't met, then the business would be burned or the businessman hurt. Then the mafia would introduce themselves as potential protectors for the businessman from the black hand extortioners themselves. This is the antithesis. And when the businessman begins paying the mafia for protection, that is the synthesis. The Illuminati are doing this tactic all over the world, and it certainly has almost everyone fooled. Mafia strongman Sam Ginkena's birth name Memo Salvatore Gingono had a girlfriend, Judith X. Nerd at JF Kennedy, a member of one of the top 13 Illuminati families, spent regular time with sexually. Ginkena also had a friend named Robert Mayhew who worked under Stavros of the Onassis family. Stavros is a Bilderberger and a nephew of Aristotle Onassis. The Onassis family, of the top 13 Illuminati families, runs the mafia. Robert Mayhew worked for Ginkena and the CIA. Why was a CIA agent willing to help Ginkena? Well, as I indicated in other places, the CIA is run by the top Illuminati families, and so is the mafia. This CIA agent, or mafia man, or Illuminati henchman, whatever you want to call Robert Mayhew, shows up in the details of the Kennedy assassination and the kidnapping of billionaire Howard Hughes. Robert Mayhew and other men like him had infiltrated Howard Hughes' organization prior to the kidnapping. In March 1957, a wing or branch of the Illuminati under Onassis, commonly known as the mob or mafia, kidnapped the upstart billionaire and genius Howard Hughes. Now do you see what happens to competition to the Illuminati top 13 families? Either you join them, or you are destroyed. Satan must keep his organization intact. From the best inside information I have obtained concerning this area of Illuminati activity, apparently to WHO were look-alike. 2 Howard Hughes were used. The reason 2 were used will be explained. First, because the Howard Hughes actually L. Wayne Rector, who on rare occasions showed himself, was a fake, the Illuminati wanted to keep him out of the public eye as much as possible, so it made sense to have another double. The natural story was that because Howard Hughes was so reclusive, he had hired Hollywood actor Brooks Randall to be his double to keep newsmen and other snoops from following him. When Howard Hughes' L. Wayne Rector would go out, then the decoy Brooks Randall would be employed to keep photographers, process servers and private detectors away from the Illuminati's real Howard Hughes' L. Wayne Rector. It was Robert Mayhew that hired Brooks Randall. And working with Mayhew and somewhat over Robert Mayhew was Eric Bundy, was given oversight of the day-to-day operations involving the control of their prisoner Howard Hughes, who most likely died in 1971, and whose public death was 1975. For those wanting an official paper trail, see Senate Report Number 94-465 entitled Alleged Assassination Plots Involving Foreign Leaders, November 28, 75, page 74, where Mayhew's role is talked about in the death of Onassis. One of Mayhew's top men was Lou Russell, who, besides working for Mayhew, the CIA, the Onassis family, was the person who bandied the security and investigative needs of the Republican National Committee (RNC). and Russell was with the company that provided security for the Watergate complex when it burgeoned. The Russell family is a top 13 family. The Russell family will of course have its own turn to have an article about them in this newsletter. It is Lou Russell who helped Nixon get his convicted. Was McCarthy and his used? It appears so. John Smith now puts out the theory contained in his book Alger Hiss, the true story which claims Alger Hiss was framed. So we have come full circle. The communist agent that almost ruined William P. Bundy's career, because Bundy was Alger Hiss's and Donald Hiss's friend, is now exonerated by a book written by an establishment researcher. McGeorge Bundy. Anthony C. Sutton does an excellent dive in his book on the Skull and Bones Order in describing how McGeorge Bundy received preferential treatment all through his life. Consistently, McGeorge Bundy got jobs for which there were thousands of better candidates. McGeorge Bundy went to Yale where he was initiated into the Skull and Bones in 1940. McGeorge then went to Harvard. After this McGeorge joined the Army as a private. Very few privates ever achieved the rate of promotion that McGeorge received. Within a year after joining as a private, McGeorge was promoted to captain. Not only was he made a captain, he was placed on staff to plan the logistics and other details of the invasion of Sicily and the Normandy invasion. That is honestly fantastic. How can a greenhorn without experience have the experience to know how much supplies, etc. are needed for a certain operation? Bear in mind that these calculations are for battles in which the wrong combination of supplies could mean death or defeat for a unit. As Sutton points out on page 51, can a 23-year-old, with no military experience, undertake planning for amphibious operations? The answer is obviously no, even if his father the order is in the Pentagon as an aide to the Secretary of War the order. After the war McGeorge continues his phenomenal climb from job to bigger job, often with no credentials. 1945. He becomes assistant to the Secretary of War and co-authors a book with Stimson. Then McGeorge, without any experience or credentials in economics, becomes a consultant to the Economic Cooperation Administration. Then he becomes foreign policy analyst for presidential candidate Thomas Dewey. Christians may recognize from the instructions that the Bible gives that pride warps our abilities to accurately see. How much pride has been installed in men like McGeorge that they feel comfortable to hop from one unqualified position to another and to make weighty decisions. 1949. Bundy was invited to Harvard University to teach as an assistant professor and in 4 years is made the dean of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences at Harvard. How does anyone become dean of a prestigious university department after 4 years of teaching? Not only has McGeorge been treated as if he is an instant military genius, an economic whiz, now he is dean of the Arts and Sciences. Bundy becomes the National Security Advisor. From 1961 to 1966 he is the Special Assistant for National Security Affairs to the President. This gives him great control over what the presidents are told. For instance, on pages 177-178 Sutton quotes a conversation between McGeorge Bundy, Dean McKysant Scroll and Key, another Illuminati initiation point, and President Kennedy, recorded in a memorandum. President Kennedy is led to believe that the United States has deserted its ally of Portugal to aid nationalists in Angola, when in fact the United States was supporting Marxist guerrillas, that is communist guerrillas. In 1966, McGeorge was appointed president of the Ford Foundation, another Illuminati foundation that is promoting their agenda. McGeorge brought in Harold Howe II to be vice president, a position that Howe was unqualified for, except that Howe was a skull and bones brother and was a team player that would help promote the New World Order agenda with its Hegelian philosophy and socialism. Both of the Fords on the foundation board resigned in disgust at the way these skull and boners were using the Ford Foundation. Harry W. Bundy was a Mason, the Satanist and the chief adept 9 degrees of the Colorado part of the SRICF. To clarify to the reader what this all means, allow me to inform you about the structures Satan has built. Pure Satanism, in order to function easier, has set up some branches which are secret. But if the public hears about these branches, they have a veneer of respectability. Dr. Wynne Westcott, the famous Satanist and the supreme magus of SRIA, wrote the rare book History of the Societas Rosicruciana in Anglia by X. It was privately printed by these Masonic Rosicrucians on December 30, 1900, and later received the B.R. Museum Press mark of 0475H54. Within this rare book, the leader of the SRIA spells out the purpose of the organization to the Brotherhood, the aim of the society, searching out the secrets of nature, to facilitate the study of the system of philosophy founded upon the Kabbalah and the doctrines of Hermes Trismegistus. Hermes Trismegistus, as many of you know, means the thrice greatest Hermes, who was the Egyptian scribe god who is claimed to be the author of all magical writing. Hermes is credited for the grossly evil satanic witchcraft rituals that the ancient Egyptians and modern Satanism continue to practice. For an excellent expose of the connections between the Egyptian Book of the Dead, Masonic rituals and modern Satanism, I suggest David Carrico's book The Masonic Egyptian Satanic Connection, obtainable from Followers of Jesus Christ, 50-20 Ashley, Dr. Evansville, Indiana 47711. As I was just writing, the number of branches of the Illuminati were created with the same pattern as the Bavarian Illuminati, and these branches sometimes refer to themselves as Illuminati, and rightly so, since they are integral part of Satanism. One branch has been set up within Freemasonry called Societas Rosicruciana. They coiled themselves Rosicrucian and Christians. How they attach the aim of Christ to Satanism is beyond my imagination. Perhaps the Christ consciousness they seek justifies in their minds calling themselves exclusively Christian. Whatever they want to coil themselves, they practice magic and Satanism. The number of daughter organizations has sprung up from the SRIA, such as the Golden Dawn, the Stella Matutina and the Ordo Templi Orientis Photo. The SRIA also worked closely with German Illuminism and the Theosophical Society. In England, the Societas Rosicruciana SR is named SR in Anglia. In Scotland it is SR in Scotia. In Greece it is SR in Grecia. In Canada it is SR in Canada. And in the United States it is SR in Civitatis Foederatis. The membership is very exclusive, and my understanding that there are about a dozen in the United States. Lodges called colleges with about 40 members each, which lends me to guess they have an exclusive membership of about 500 in the United States. Membership in Societas Rosicruciana has included such notable Satanists such as Adolf L. Waite, Eliphas Levi, and Kenneth Mackenzie. It has included that Luciferian Albert Pike too. Within a nation, the arena are divided up into provinces, each of which has a college, their fancy word for a satanic lodge. On April 28, 1948, Harry W. Bundy became the chief adept of the Colorado College. 2 letters by the supreme magus of all the SR groups, Wynne Westcott, are photocopied so that the reader can read for himself from the SRIA supreme magus lending magician that they are connected to the Illuminati. See for yourself. An interesting point in light of what I have printed in other newsletters. The mass College in 1393 printed a book by its supreme magus ruled 9 degrees, which declares that the grand central sun of the universe is Alcyone in the Pleiades. Shades of Alice Daly and C.T. Russell, one of the most knowledgeable people to try to expose the New World Order and the satanic hierarchy behind it, said, "It remains for the student to follow every line of inquiry to the point of concentration where no threads are gathered and systematically manipulated for the eventual destruction of Christian civilization. It may lend to the B'nai B'rith, the Universal Israelite Alliance, India or Tibet, but in any case a thorough and complete study of Rosicrucianism embracing a minute one of Rosicrucianism in Anglia and its various branches will be a great step taken in the direction of uncovering much of the political and moral chaos of present-day history of mankind." P. 510. Interesting that this expert would say this. The threads go back to 13 top families, and wouldn't you know, several of their people are lenders of the SRI-8, including Harry W. Bundy. The Bundy family has been a very powerful family in American history which has managed to keep itself out of the limelight. Often the members the Bundys have had power by virtue of being advisors to those in powerful positions. P.S. Congressman Reese, the real hero, tried to go farther and expose the connections between his, though Carnegie Endowment Fund, the Morgan Bank, and the rest of the tax-exempt foundations. The Illuminati moved mightily against Reese,